Alright, so this is chapter 6, section 3, and it's on Mendel and hereditary. The key concept here is that Mendel's research showed that traits are inherited as discrete units. So back in the 1600s, there was this guy named Gregor Mendel right here. And Mendel was a priest, and he was also someone who was a mathematician, and he really enjoyed working with plants. Mendel did a bunch of famous experiments on pea plants that essentially established the groundwork for modern day genetics. So some of the main points that he laid out were that traits are distinguishing characteristics that are inherited. So a trait is some sort of distinguishing characteristic. So like your hair color, your eye color, whether you're tall or short. Basically, a trait is kind of what makes you you, and that these are inherited. So these aren't you aren't just randomly tall or randomly short, or you don't randomly look the way you look. It's based upon inheritance. It's based upon what your parents looked like. And so genetics in biology, it's a study of the biological inheritance patterns and variation. So the patterns, so how, why is it that you look like your brothers and sisters, in the variation as well. So, but why is it, why do you look slightly different? Why don't you look identical to your brothers and sisters? And those two kind of ideas, the patterns and the variation, can be what referred to as genetics. And Gregor Mendel showed that traits are inherited as discrete units. So this word discrete, so if you're talking about, if you're in a math class and they said that they want you to count discretely, they would mean they want you to count by integers, or going from 1 to 2 to 3, meaning they don't want you, going from 1 to 1.1, then 1.2. That would not be discrete. So discrete is just going incrementally. And I'll get into what I mean by that in the coming slides as far as how that relates to biology. So many in Mendel's day thought that traits were blended rather than discrete. So blended, if I go on to the next slide here, people thought that traits were, if you had a purple, people thought that if you had a purple flower and a white flower, that if you brought these two together, you'd have a pink flower. In other words, that there would be a blending, right? So if this was like paint, if you put purple paint and white paint together, that's going to make pink paint. Well, that's not how it works, actually. What Mendel discovered was that these traits are inherited discretely, meaning that if you see these other plants here, you either got purple or you got white. So in other words, there's either or to these traits. So when Mendel was studying genetics, he chose the pea plant as sort of his model plant, and he specifically used purebred plants, which means that the plants had the exact same genetic makeup. They were the exact same plants, and then he took control over breeding. So rather than letting the kind of nature do its business and it be random plants coming together, or pea plants just self-fertilizing, he would take different types of pea plants and he would control which plants would come together. And he did that because he wanted to see what would happen if he brought this type of pea plant together with this type of pea plant, and trying to see, is there some sort of pattern to this? Is there some sort of predictability to all this? And when he was doing this, he used 7 either-or traits. So 7 traits where you could say either or. So he looked at height, so where the plants are either tall or short, or he looked at pea, the shape of the pea, where it was either round or is wrinkled. And we'll get into the other traits that he looked at in the meantime. But again, it was either or. So there wasn't a whole lot of, there wasn't like 8 different options that these plants could look like. They either had this or they had that. Okay, so in order to do these experiments, when he was working with pea plants are self-pollinators, meaning that all of the male and the female parts are all together in one flower. Where you have this yellow part right here, this is called the stamen, and then you have where the sperm of the plant is, and then right here would be the pistil, and the pistil is where the female eggs are at. And normally in nature, for pea plants, the pollen or the sperm would travel from here just a short distance to the pistil and come together with the egg, and you would have fertilization, and then you'd have another genetically identical pea plant that would come from that. Well, Mendel wasn't interested in genetically identical plants. He wanted to mix and match. He wanted to take different types of pea plants and bring them together. So he essentially castrated this plant and just cut off this stamen right here so that he could take, with a little paintbrush, pollen granules from a different pea plant and bring them together with the pistil. So, an example of one of the breedings he did was he took purple flowers, and he took white flowers. In this notation here, this P, that stands for the parent generation. So these are the two parents, and these are purebred. So they were completely white, and then purple, completely purple. And what he found when he crossed them together was that all of the F1, or the first generations, were purple flowers, which again was, as I mentioned earlier, what you would normally expect if traits were blended was you would expect these to be pink, but what happened was these are purple. And because these plants were purple rather than white, Mendel determined that purple must be dominant. And from now on, I'll just put D for dominant. And then that the white, because the white got kind of masked or kind of pushed out by the purple, he said that the white was recessive. So we'll just say that. We'll just put an R from now on. However, what was more surprising was that whenever you took these purple flowers here from the F1 and you bred them together and you got the F2, you found that you had 3 purple flowers, and then all of a sudden you randomly had this white flower that reappeared. And this reappearing of the recessive white flower in this trait for flower color is something that he saw continuously. And so you could describe this as, you call this as 3 to 1, where you had 3 the dominant D purple flowers for every 1 white flower. And so these were the other 6 traits that he did these types of experiments for, and he found a sort of a continuous pattern here. So for all the other traits, he would find the same 3 to 1 ratio, where for P shape he would have, for the dominant one, for the round one, he would have about 3 round for every recessive wrinkled one. And same thing for all the other traits. So going through these experiments, he came to 3 really important conclusions. The first was that traits are inherited as discrete units, and that came from the fact that you either had purple or you had white flowers, that there wasn't any sort of blending, and that organisms must inherit 2 copies of each gene, where you have 1 from each parent, which is what you're seeing right here. And that's an idea that we've talked about previously. That's kind of an established idea for us, where you get 1 gene from mom and 1 gene from dad. One of these chromosomes that has this gene from mom, and one of these chromosomes that has this gene from dad. This idea of an allele. So an allele is a different version of a gene. So what I mean by that is this purple color right here and this white color here. So this gene and this gene are 2 different types of alleles. You could think of alleles as if you think of alleles as like ice cream flavors, where each different flavor of ice cream would be like a different type of allele. So it's just a way of saying that we have a type of gene. When you have two homologous chromosomes that have the same genes, when you focus in on one gene, this gene can make a protein that will have a different type of trait or a different allele. So purple, white, you could have different colors, and say I had red on here. That red would be another different allele. Okay, so you have two copies of each gene, one from mom, one from dad, and whenever you're making your gametes, or whenever you're making the sperm and the eggs during meiosis, those two copies are going to segregate. And they're going to do so randomly, meaning if I focus on the purple and the white alleles here, you don't know which sperm or which egg is going to get the purple allele and which sperm or which egg is going to get the white allele. And collectively, these previous two statements right here and right here form the law of segregation. Okay, and that'll do it for this section.